There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy, Shakespeare once wrote, and in the quiet villages and bustling towns of the United Kingdom, ordinary people have encountered the extraordinary, humanoid beings from beyond the known. Tonight we journey through decades of mysterious encounters on British soil, all drawn from documented case files. Our voyage begins in the 70s, a time when, in lonely fields and suburban gardens, the uncanny became reality. It's the spring of 1977 in rural Pembrokeshire, Wales, and on a clear April night at Ripperston Farm near the village of Dale, Mrs. Pauline Coombs and her husband Billy sit watching television. Without warning, Pauline glimpses a figure at the window, a towering humanoid shape in a luminous silver suit. For a moment she says nothing, and then Billy sees it too. The being stands over 7 feet tall. Its broad shoulders are almost 3 feet wide. A soft glow outlines its form, and a helmet conceals any face behind a dark, square visor. By the time police and an investigator arrive, the mysterious visitor has vanished into the night. Throughout the spring of 77, southwest Wales endures a wave of such encounters. In the town of Milford Haven, residents report a series of bizarre, nocturnal visitations. In the middle of May 77, at about 3 a.m., a 17-year-old girl in Milford Haven is awoken by a bright light shining into her bedroom. She parts the curtains to find a hovering silver disc with a green glow around its edge. Suddenly, a short, humanoid man appears, right at her upstairs window, as though standing in mid-air. He had long, brown hair, slanted eyebrows, and a curved nose. His eyes look almost human. He wears a shiny one-piece suit with mittens and simply stares at the terrified girl. Panicking, she shuts the curtains and eventually the light fades away. Meanwhile, in England, strange figures appear in forests and on quiet roads. On the evening of the 8th of May 1977, 2 men, walking a dog in Hainault Forest on the outskirts of London, witnessed something out of a nightmare. In drizzling rain, they hear a rustling in the bushes. Suddenly an 8-foot-tall figure, hulking and indistinct, crosses their path, only 25 feet ahead. It seems oddly blurred, lacking clearly defined arms or legs, and almost like a dark blue silhouette, brighter than the surrounding gloom. The men freeze as this giant shape glides into the woods and then disappears. The only trace of its passing is the eerie silence that was left behind. Curiously, they later learned that a UFO had been reported landing nearby just days before. One evening in July of 77, as dusk creeps through the Minley Manor woods, a family out for a drive stumbles on a clandestine military operation, and something frankly beyond imagination. Hannah Green and her family notice coachloads of troops swarming into the woods via an access road, as if searching for or guarding something. Concerned by this unusual activity, they decide to turn back. And as they round a bend, their headlights catch sight of 2 strange figures standing on a slope among the trees. These figures are tall and incredibly thin, and clad in seamless white suits with helmets reminiscent of Apollo astronauts. For a moment, both parties, family and figures, remain still, regarding one another. And then, with unnerving suddenness, the 2 white-suited beings break into a run and head for a clearing. Most astonishing of all, as Hannah watches, the figures then vanish into thin air before her very eyes. Across the country, reports continue to pour in. In Coldstream, England, also in June of 77, 2 young boys playing in a field observe a dull, white oval craft floating above a nearby meadow. The object has a green light underneath and a blue light on top, with a dome featuring a large window. As the boys watch, the mysterious oval descends behind some trees, and through its window they glimpse several small green figures, moving inside, and strange writing or symbols on the craft's hull. Suddenly the object shoots straight up into the sky and vanishes, leaving the boys astonished. Similarly, in the quiet village of Moulton in Northamptonshire, a motorist driving home after midnight, one autumn in 77, encounters an intense bluish-green light. He halts as a large circular UFO reveals itself, hovering low. Through an oblong window on its underside, he can see 3 figures staring back at him, man-like beings with large heads, wearing blue-green uniforms. The transfixed driver and these occupants regard one another for several moments, and only the approach of another car on the road breaks this spell. On an autumn afternoon in East Sussex, an ordinary bus stop becomes the site of an extraordinary abduction, or near abduction. As a lone woman waits for her bus at around 5:20 p.m, a domed disc hovers silently overhead. The woman playfully waves at it, thinking it might be an aircraft, and to her shock, the object responds. It tilts and directs some invisible force at her, and in an instant her consciousness blinks. The next thing she knows, the bus has arrived and she's sat on it, her cigarette burned down to the filter between her fingers. And yes, back in those days you could smoke on the bus. She's got no memory of boarding, and in the following days she suffers disorientation and uncoordinated movements with headaches and conjunctivitis and insomnia. Only vague impressions resurface, and she recalls telepathic conversations with the beings aboard that craft, with them pleading for her to come with them, and of her own deep intuition that if she did, she might never return to Earth. In Wallasey, England, that same autumn, a woman named Miss Daisy Jenkins experiences recurring visitations by a gliding entity. She lives alone and has endured poltergeist-like disturbances, odd lights and psychic phenomena in her home. One night at around 8 p.m, Daisy draws her bedroom curtains and is startled to see a human figure in a silvery metallic outfit standing at the back of her garden. The being's suit shines under the street lamps with a light on top of its helmet and one at the end of each arm. Roughly 6 feet tall, the entity simply stands there, silently staring at her window. Miss Jenkins later reports that she has seen this same figure multiple times, sometimes floating in midair and even flying over the treetops. Who or what it is remains unknown. A ghost, an alien, or something in between. The locals have no answers, and Daisy Jenkins is left with the unsettling honour of being observed by the floating man of Wallasey. Somerset became host to a pair of connected encounters. On a September evening near Windwhistle Hill in South England, Kate Walker, her husband, and their 2 young sons are driving along an isolated hilltop road. Through patches of mist, they suddenly perceive an enormous, diffuse orange light beside the road, cigar-shaped, hanging low, and still. Kate and her family feel time itself slow down as they approach it. The car's engine falters and dies. The headlights go dim, and in an uncanny silence, one of the sons glimpses a dark shape bending down by his window. A very tall form, human-like, but somehow not human, peering in at them. And then in a flash the spell breaks. A cyclist's headlamp appears up ahead, and just like that the giant orange light has gone. The family realizes with a start that they cannot account for a significant chunk of time during this incident. A few days afterward, on the same stretch of road near Chad, the Walker family's journey home is interrupted once more. This time, as their car crests the hill at night, they see 2 figures by the roadside, one lying down and the other standing over it. Kate's husband slows the car, only for the standing figure to take a single giant stride out into the road, 1 foot on the grassy verge, the other already past the centre line. This thing is abnormally tall. Its legs are ridiculously elongated and thin, and in a panic, the family swerves around this towering entity and speeds off without looking back. In a suburban corner of Dorset, another Briton has a face-to-face meeting with the unknown. Mrs. Ethel Field is in her backyard one night at around 11 p.m. gathering her dry laundry from the line. Suddenly she feels a tremor in the ground and hears a deep humming sound. Fearing an earthquake, she looks up towards the sea and sees a large, saucer-shaped object hurtling upward from behind neighbouring houses, and then it arcs in her direction. The craft is bright and metallic, with a dome on top. Through square windows, in that dome, Ethel clearly observes 2 occupants inside. The saucer stops short above a nearby garden and tilts towards her, as if allowing the figures to get a better look. One figure appears to sit at a control panel, while the other stands and actually points directly at Mrs. Field. They wear silvery suits and tight helmets that come to a point over where their noses would be. A brilliant light floods the air, forcing Ethel to shield her eyes, and then in a flash, the object accelerates and zooms off into the sky. In the days after, Mrs. Field discovers an odd injury. The skin on her hands begins to peel and flake without apparent cause. It's a malady she has never experienced before. Was this a side effect of the intense light beam, perhaps? As October arrives in 77, a family driving near the village of Marsh Gibbon in Buckinghamshire encounters a more menacing visitor. One night, as they travel down Station Road, their car engine abruptly fails and rolls to a stop. Out of the darkness steps a tall figure in a shining silver suit, emerging from behind a roadside hedge. This being walks calmly around the stalled vehicle in a single loop, and then disappears into the hedgerow on the opposite side of the road. Only after it's gone do the family realize just how terrified they are. Later inspection of the car reveals that its paintwork on one side is scorched and singed, as though exposed to some intense heat or radiation. The very next month, a similar incident is reported in the same area. It seems that whatever walked by their car might well have returned again, searching for something or maybe even someone. And as 77 drew to a close, another encounter took place in Yorkshire on the night of the 30th December 1977 in Rose, West Yorkshire actually. 4 friends are spending a late evening together at one of their homes, and without warning, a small being just over 2 feet tall suddenly just appears in the room with them. It is a winged humanoid, hovering at the foot of a bed. The entity wears a silvery white suit and a helmet with 2 large vertical slits where its eyes should be. For several long minutes, this miniature visitor floats silently before the astonished men, and then as eerily as it arrived, the being simply just faded away, dissolved into thin air. The guys are left shaken, and some might be tempted to call it an apparition of a fairy or an angel, but in ufology, actually, it's catalogued as a close encounter in its own right. Researcher Nigel Watson would later remark that even in the realm of UFOs, this case had an ultra-surreal element to it. And if 77 brought unprecedented waves of humanoid sightings to Britain, then 78 would lead the decade in variety and volume. All across the world, and here in the UK, witnesses reported entities of all manner of descriptions. In Britain and Ireland especially, nocturnal intruders and alien figures seem to just step out of the shadows with alarming frequency. In the early hours of January the 2nd, 78, 4 young men are driving home along an isolated, boggy road near Simonswood Moss in Lancashire. The flat marshland around them is dark and silent as they realise they've taken a wrong turn down a narrow dirt lane by a drainage ditch. Without warning, their headlights illuminate a towering figure about 8 metres ahead. 7 feet tall, the being stands in the middle of the track, and though humanoid in shape, it has no discernible face. Its arms are also oddly short, and they end in claw-like hands. On its chest is a box with 2 flashing red lights. The driver slams on the brakes, and for a moment the figure takes 2 steps towards the car. That's enough for these guys, and panic overcomes them. They throw the car into reverse and speed away, not stopping until they reach a nearby farm to call the police. Officers find no trace of this lonely figure on that lonely road. But the witnesses will never forget the image of that claw-handed, red-lighted giant confronting them in the headlights. And you can see a full breakdown of that case on this video right here. Mid-January 78, other English towns became stages for close encounters. In Anlaby, North Humberside, on the evening of the 18th of January, 4 schoolboys are startled by a spectacular landing right on their school's roof. It begins with a sharp whistling sound from above, and looking up the boys see a round, silvery object with windows, its lights flashing through every colour as it descends onto the flat rooftop. The craft comes to rest, and moments later, 3 small beings emerge onto the roof. The boys observe that these figures are short and have no arms. They wear gold-coloured suits with tubes extending from their backs into the object, perhaps some sort of a life support or a tether or something, and the boys watch in absolute amazement as these little golden-suited beings scurry around briefly and then hurry back inside their ship. The saucer rises slowly, and one boy catches sight of the creatures through a hole in the bottom, retaking their seats at control stations. And with that, the UFO speeds away into the night sky. And when the children later report what they saw, investigators cited it as a solid Type B encounter, involving an apparent extraterrestrial craft with occupants. January 78, and in the rural fields near Frodsham in Cheshire, 4 men out on a late-night poaching excursion encounter something utterly unexpected. In the misty early hours by the banks of the River Weaver, they notice what looks like a silvery balloon gliding over the river's surface. The object drifts to the riverbank and settles onto a field, emitting a strong purple glow that makes the whole scene hard to look at directly. From this glow emerges 2 human-sized figures. The beings wear silvery suits and have what appear to be mining headlamps on their helmets, except that these lamps also shine with this same purple light. Nearby cattle in a pasture react strangely. The cows become motionless, as if paralysed, unable to move or cry out. The poachers watch in disbelief as the 2 figures pull out a kind of metal enclosure or cage, and moving efficiently, they herd one of the cows into the cage and begin to examine and measure the animal with some kind of device. And you can watch a full video about that one here. The very next night, a couple driving through Chelmsford in Essex are treated to a brief but startling display in the sky. A bright light descends from the sky directly in front of their car, and as it nears they see clearly that it is a disc-shaped craft, brilliantly illuminated with a large panoramic window. Inside that window, several figures can be seen peering out at them. Before the astonished couple can react, the glowing disc changes course and swiftly glides away. On February the 1st of 78, in the market town of Gainsborough, Lincolnshire, another solitary witness encounters the unknown. At about 10:20 p.m, this individual observes a large silvery disc streaking across the sky in a controlled descent. The disc comes down behind a stand of nearby trees and lands out of direct sight. The witness cautiously approaches and glimpses 2 6-foot-tall figures standing beside the landed craft. They are man-like in shape and clad in shiny silvery suits. No further details are recorded before the object lifts off again at tremendous speed, vanishing into the starry night. 21st of February 78, and a strange meeting occurs on a foggy back road near Nettlebed in Oxfordshire. At 10:45 p.m, a motorist creeps through thick patches of fog when he enters a clearer stretch and then slams on his brakes. 2 figures stand in the middle of the road ahead, and they are bandaged like mummies, head to toe, with arms outstretched. The driver's wife screams as he swerves desperately to avoid them. Almost as soon as they appeared, the fog rolls in again, and they've gone. March of 78 brought its own rash of encounters. In the Cheshire village of Risley, next to a major nuclear energy facility, an engineer has a double brush with the unexplained. On the night of the 17th of March 78, whilst driving by the reactor site, This engineer's headlights caught a bizarre figure climbing down an embankment near the road. The being was very, very tall, about 7 feet, and silvery in colour. It stooped down as it moved with its arms outstretched awkwardly, and as the stunned driver watched, the figure stepped onto the road, halting right in front of his car, and then it turns its gaze towards him, and from its face emanate 2 thin beams of light. The twin beams shine directly at the witness, who sits frozen for almost a minute, whilst bathed in this creature's inexplicable gaze, and then without a sound, the silvery being walks to the side of the road and straight through a 10-foot-tall security fence topped with barbed wire, passing through it as if it just didn't exist. 6 nights later, that same engineer returned to the site, and this time he was accompanied by a UFO investigator. Just after midnight, they pack and climb the embankment together. The night is still, and suddenly the engineer feels a strange pressure in his head, and a prickling sensation, the uncanny sign he remembers from before. The investigator steps briefly away, and in that tiny moment, the witness glimpses this tall humanoid figure again, standing in a nearby field. It wears the same silvery suit, and the being is walking away, melting into the darkness. In February of 79, Flintshire, North Wales, and in the village of Oakenholt, near the town of Flint, a woman walking her dog at dusk experiences something out of a dream. It is 6:15 p.m. on the 21st of February, and her dog suddenly whimpers and lies flat on the ground, afraid. The woman looks up ahead just to see a bright orange sphere hovering in midair. Movement in the nearby bushes draws her gaze, and standing among the shadows are 2 humanoid figures in silvery garb. They're watching her, and incredibly, they are actually smiling at her. For a moment, human and humanoids simply regarded each other, and then the witness's dog barked, distracting her briefly, and when she looked back, the silvery figures had vanished. Just 3 days later, on the 24th, a solitary motorcyclist named Phil Shepherdson rides through the morning mist near Crake in North Yorkshire. It's about 8 a.m, and he rounds a bend and spots, hovering in a corner of a field, a black triangular craft, unlike anything he's ever seen before. The triangle hangs silently a short distance above the ground. Nearby, Phil can see 2 tall, slim figures standing beside it, and a third figure seated inside what appears to be a cockpit. The 2 outside turn towards him, as if aware of his presence. They wear dark coverall suits and helmets. The figure in the cockpit is also helmeted and dressed in black. At that moment, Phil feels a brief sensation of mental contact, an indescribable knowing that these beings are communicating somehow directly with him. Before he can process more, the craft lifts off and streaks away. March of 79 in Sheffield, and a man and a woman chat by an outdoor payphone in plain daylight, and to their amazement, they notice a grey disc-shaped craft hovering above a nearby restaurant. The disc has a dome on top, and through a transparent window, they can clearly see 2 man-like figures watching them. And then in a blink, the craft zips away, and normal sounds rush back. The woman later experiences odd psychic phenomena in the aftermath, seeing an apparition of her deceased husband, for example, among other things. Perhaps the encounter acted as a catalyst for latent sensitivities. Portsmouth, Hampshire, a historic naval city, and an encounter of a very different nature occurs twice in 79. The first incident in March was fleeting, when a strange little man in an immaculate black RAF-style uniform who passed a woman on the street and vanished when she looked back. The witness described him as about 5 feet tall, with olive skin, large dark eyes, and slicked back black hair, and a dead, baleful gaze. He walked past her mechanically, and when she spun around expecting to see his retreat, there was nobody there. And in the same place, a local woman is in her front garden and senses something moving in a big hedgerow at the edge of her property. The twilight is unnaturally still, not a breeze, not a sound, and as she watches, parts of the bush seem to open up, and within the foliage she discerns multiple small faces peering out. They are not children, In fact, she describes them as resembling elves or pixies. The creatures appear only partially solid, their lower bodies obscured by leaves. She then sees their misshapen little hands slowly extending towards her, and at that, terror overwhelms her. She finds she can't even scream. She bolts indoors and slams the doors behind her, and after some time she cautiously peeks outside and sees that the elves have gone. Gateshead, September of 79, and an entire family experiences a frightening home invasion by the unknown. Following several nights of UFO sightings in the area at low level, one of the women of the household awakens in the dead of night to see a small metallic disc floating inside her bedroom. As she struggles to comprehend this impossible sight, a dozen tiny men materialize around her bed. They stand only about 2.5 feet tall, with large heads and large eyes. Their features are oddly feminine, actually, but they wear crisp white uniforms with cloaks. The beings approach the bed and begin to examine the witness, who finds herself paralyzed. After what feels like minutes, they depart just as suddenly as they arrived. The next morning she recalls only fragments, and later reports another bizarre encounter with a single entity in her home. November of 79, and a forestry worker named Bob Taylor took his dog for a walk in Deckmont Law near Livingston, and in a clearing he was astonished to confront a large spherical craft resting on the grass. As he approached, 2 smaller spheres suddenly dropped out of the bigger object. These devices resembled old naval mines, round with protruding metal spikes. With uncanny speed, the spiked spheres rolled and bounded towards him. They latched onto his trousers and began dragging him towards the larger UFO. He sensed an acrid smell and a whooshing sound before losing consciousness. You can watch a full video about that one here. Only a month later, in December, Glasgow had a close encounter, a rather more ethereal one at that. In the Drum Chapel area of the city at about 1 a.m, a young woman stood alone by the road waiting for a taxi to head home. The night was cold and still, and suddenly a strange noise came from above, and a brilliant shaft of light shone straight down. It hit the pavement right in front of her, and in disbelief she watched as the head and shoulders of a figure rose up out of the solid road inside the beam of light. She turned and she ran, fleeing the scene before this mysterious figure fully emerged. There are thousands of cases like this, but what are we supposed to make of it all? There are some patterns that you can now see on screen here. Some skeptics write them off as dreams, hallucinations, or, yes, hoaxes, and that's fine. When you take them together, as we have done today, recorded by different investigators from different regions and different years, you start to see some consistencies. So perhaps it tells us that we are definitely not alone, and perhaps we've never really been alone. The humanoids, whoever or whatever they are, they seem to have been coming here for a long time. I guess from the other, wherever, whenever, or whatever the other happens to be. Introducing the Eeries Vault Patreon page, a treasure trove of research notes, newspaper and magazine clippings, exclusive on-location video content, early access to public videos, and access to the Erie Isles interactive Google map with countless sighting and encounter locations for you to peruse at your leisure. This will be updated each time a new video is released and will become one of the most comprehensive encounters maps in the world. With membership options from as little as £1 per month. What are you waiting for? Head over to the Vault. Eeries Vault Live is a live stream show here on YouTube where you, the viewer, can have a call about your own stories about the weird, the paranormal and the unexplained. The show starts at 9 p.m. GMT every Friday night, and we want to hear your stories. You can also email your stories ahead of the show to be read out live on air. Just send an email to eeriesvault@gmail.com with your story, opinion, or suggestions relating to high-strangeness and the unexplained. That's Eeries Vault live, Fridays at 9 p.m. GMT, here on YouTube.